This is the buyer pool, and the buyer pool makes up the market. Okay, all the different buyers in the buyer pool makes up the market. So if we're talking about cap rates, let's try to get through as easy of an explanation as possible. Let's say that we have a piece of property, and let's say that property produces $100,000 a year. Okay, now let's say that an investor wants to make 10% on their money, 10% return per year. So if we have the price times 10% equals the $100,000 of income, right? Let's think about that for a second. Let's even put this into something that we can wrap our hands around. So I've actually got some coins here, and I have got some nickels. I've got 10 nickels here, and let's say that the $100,000 is represented by one nickel. Okay, if an investor wanted to make the $100,000, the nickel here, this is what the business or the property produces, and we want 10%, all we have to figure out is what is the price. Well, when you think about it, one nickel is 10% of what? One nickel is 10% of a dollar, right? 4 quarters here. So we've got 4 quarters. This is 10% of 4 quarters. So how do we do that in terms of a math equation? Well, here's what we do. We say divide both sides by 10%. If we divide both sides by 10%, then this side is going to cancel out if we go back to math, and then all we have to remember is that price equals $100,000 divided by 10%. So it's not simple math. Some of us can do it in our heads, but let's think about this. If we have the price of the income, of $100,000, and we want to divide it by 10%, that's going to be 0.10, and that comes out to $1 million. And it makes sense, particularly when we think about, well, if we have one dime, what is 10 times one dime? Well, it's $1. One dime is 10% of 4 quarters. And so it's a little bit easier to think about when you have that visual, and these math equations can seem kind of scary. But at the end of the day, if we have an investor who wants a 10% return, and we have a property that produces $100,000 a year, then the price that that investor is going to be willing to pay is $1 million. Okay? So that is the basics of the mechanism of how a cap rate works. In reality, a cap rate is just a rate of return. Okay? The cap rate is just a rate of return. All it's telling us what percentage of the purchase price is the income that we're buying. Again, $100,000 is 10% of $1 million. If we wanted a 10% return. But we just made this 10% return up, okay? I just made it up. This has to be driven by the market. So let's talk about what the market actually is. The market consists of, and it depends on what kind of market you're in, but if we're in the real estate market, let's take an example. Let's say that we have, let's say we're selling a mini storage property, a self-storage property in Georgia. Okay, that's relatable for me. So let's say there are 5 buyers in the market for self-storage properties in Georgia. Now, in reality, there may be more, there may be less at any given time, depending on the property, depending on how nice the property is, how big the property is. There will be a different size of market. But again, the 10% that we just talked about over here, this 10% is going to be market driven. So we're just talking about what the market is. In this example, there are 5 buyers in the market. So we'll have buyer A, buyer B, buyer C, buyer D, and buyer E. Now, let's talk about the experience. Maybe buyer A is brand new. He just got into self-storage investing. Buyer B is experienced. So let's say buyer D has been doing this forever. He has legend status. And let's say buyer E is also very new. So that's their experience. And then let's talk about their desired rates of return. Their desired rates of return could be different for any number of reasons. Their desired rates of return could be different because they have a lot of cash, because they don't, because maybe buyer E lives in California and he pays a different taxes than buyer B. There's a lot of different reasons. Okay, so maybe buyer A, he's new, he's looking for a 15% rate of return. Maybe buyer B has a 10% rate of return target. Maybe the Legend here has a 12% desired rate of return. And then maybe buyer E is so new they don't know what's going on and they are comfortable with a 5% rate of return. So if we think back to our calculation here, all of these guys are willing to pay a different price based off of their desired rate of return. 10% is what we made up. We have to go into the market. Now, the market also changes as different buyers and different people in the market have different things. Maybe buyer A, this new guy, has little cash. Maybe he doesn't have very much cash at the moment. Maybe buyer B has a lot of cash currently. Maybe buyer D has, of course, all the cash, a lot of cash. Okay, so all of these guys, they come in, how much cash they have and their rate of return is going to depend on what kind of offer they make on this property that produces $100,000 a year. So let's talk about the property itself, okay? We've talked a little bit about this. This is the buyer pool, and the buyer pool makes up the market, okay? All the different buyers in the buyer pool makes up the market. So if we have this mini storage property, let's say that it is a great property. Guys, it doesn't matter if this is a mini storage building, doesn't matter if this is an apartment complex, doesn't matter if this is a business, doesn't matter. Let's say the income on this property equals $150,000 a year. So again, that's a dime and that's a nickel. So the income is $150,000 a year. That's from renting it out. The expenses, labor, what is not included is the mortgage payment to the bank. That is not included in these expenses, okay? So let's say these expenses, all from right here, come out to $50,000 a year, okay? Again, that's a nickel. So what is the actual income? And in real estate, we call this net income of this business. Well, if we have $150,000 and we take out $50,000, then of course we're left with $100,000. Now the question is, we've got this piece of property that produces $100,000 a year. It has a nickel of income. We're going to shop this to all of our different buyers who are available and able to make an offer in the market. This guy has little cash, so he's really not able to make an offer. He's able to make an offer. He's going to tap out because he's not necessarily ready to make an offer. We're getting an offer from him and we're getting an offer from, so we're getting offers from B, C, and E, okay, inside this pool. Well, investor B would like to offer this divided by 10%. Okay, so he's going to offer us, again, $1 million. Now, investor C, the legend, wants the $100,000 divided by not 10%, but 8%, okay? So what is his offer going to be? It's super simple. Remember, all we have to do is take the income and we just have to divide it by the rate of return. So we have $100,000 divided by 0.08, 1.25 million. So from the legend, we're going to get a $1.25 million offer. Now, what about from investor E? Let's remember real fast, investor E is brand new and they don't know what's going on, so they're going to offer a 5% rate of return. Well, $100,000 divided by the 5% comes out to 100,000 divided by 0.05 equals $2 million. Okay? So we have the same piece of property. It generates $150,000 for all buyers. It has $50,000 of expenses for all buyers. Yet we'll get 3 different purchase prices because we have different rates of return that these different investors are targeting. So does that mean that it's worth whatever we want it to be? No, at the end of the day, it's worth what somebody is willing to pay us for it, which is all determined inside of this buyer pool. Now, where a lot of people get confused is they think that they can go out and they can offer their property at a 5% rate of return and obviously ask for $2 million. But the truth is, what if this guy right here who's new, what if he's so new he had an interest and then he just leaves the market? Right? What if he just is no longer in the market and his offer is pulled off the table? So now we don't even have this offer anymore. It's no longer available. We're just working between these two. So the point being is that a cap rate is going to be market driven, and maybe you have an outlier. Maybe you have an outlier to the low rate of return, and maybe you have an outlier to the high rate of return. Just because you get offers on your property doesn't mean they're actually worth that amount. Okay, and to the same degree, if somebody came in here, if this investor offered you 15%, well, what's $100,000 divided by 15%? Let's divide this by 15%, and that comes out to, divided by 0.15, comes out to $666,000. Ooh, scary. I don't like that number. We'll go 667. Okay, so $667,000. So this investor lowballed you, right? This is called a lowball. Okay, but that doesn't mean that's what your property's worth. In aggregate, the cap rate that you choose really needs to be the average of what experienced and able buyers are able to do. Okay, and how do you go out and how do you find experienced and able buyers? Well, you look at other properties that have actually sold. It's like comping properties. You want to go look at what other properties have sold for so that you can actually get an idea. It's not what people are asking, right? I've heard a lot of people say, I'm trying to sell my mini storage because the one down the road sold for $2 million. Well, maybe this buyer, right, was brand new. They didn't know what they were doing, and now they're losing money on their other transaction. Doesn't mean that just because they paid a 5% rate of return, a 5 cap for a property, that these guys are willing to. So just because you look at other properties that have sold for crazy amounts doesn't mean that's necessarily what yours is. But again, the whole purpose here, guys, is to talk to you about what a cap rate is and how a cap rate is calculated. So at the end of the day, all you have to know is that a cap rate comes out to the NOI from a property. Again, if we have $150,000 of income, we have $50,000 of expenses. At the end of the day, we are left with $100,000 of income. What is the rate of return the market is trying to get? Is that property worth $1 million? Is that property worth $2 million? Okay, we don't know. What we do know is that we can control the value of our property, because let's say that it is a 10% rate of return. We have $100,000 of income and we have a 10% rate of return. Well, guess what? If you can find a way to increase that income by $100,000 and keep your expenses the same, then you've automatically gotten double the net income. And even if your rate of return in the market of buyers does not change, because you have raised the income on your property from $100,000 to $200,000, you have also automatically doubled the value of your business. Doesn't matter what's happening in the market, you have doubled the value because you've doubled your income. And that's why cap rates are so powerful, is because you can control what your property is worth based off of the income. You can't control the market. You can control what kind of markets you get into, where you buy property, what kind of properties you buy, but you cannot control what people are willing to pay, what rate of return they're willing to pay. You have to be willing to control the value and the income your business produces. Drop any questions you have below. I'm super happy to help out. This is a fundamental, game-changing difference of creating wealth in real estate, so I want you guys to understand. If you have any questions, leave a comment below.